You have heard that it was said of those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, you fool, will be liable to hell fire. So if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with them to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Really, I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. Today we're talking about the passage in Matthew 5, verses 21 through 26. This is Jesus' teaching on anger. Um, it's an interesting one because he does this a few other times, a few other parts of Matthew 5 where he likens a habit to a commandment sin. In this case, he likens anger towards your brother as just as guilty and just as liable to judgment as someone who would murder. So this is a hard teaching at right out the gate. I think um, our human nature is to judge based on the outward appearance of things, and it's a lot easier for us to look at a murderer and everything that they've done, their heinous acts towards people, and make a judgment and say that's evil, that's wrong. But to look at someone who possibly has anger towards a neighbor or friend or family member that's oftentimes not easily seen and it's kind of passed over and there's not a lot of judgment in that because we just say oh that's their issue, that's their heart issue. Jesus is saying that our heart issues should be very important to us, right? And not only our own, but those of our community, those of our church family. Their heart issues should be our issues. We should care about those things and we should call each other to repentance in those things. And so not only in this passage does Jesus liken these two things and say that they'll be held to the same judgment, a murderer and someone who has anger towards a brother or friend or family, someone a part of your community. But he also gives us the recipe on how to go about changing this. How do we go about being angry people? How do we go about, festering in our anger and, creating bitterness out of that? And the important thing, and the one word I would use to basically describe this method or this recipe is priority. Reconciliation, conflict resolution should be a top priority in all of our relationships. You know, my wife jokes about it with other people, but I've always held the view that conflict is one of the most crucial points of any relationship. And when me and my wife got married, um, one of the things that there was abundance of was conflict. And that's a lot of marriages, that's a lot of relationships. And you can either respond with despising those times and avoiding them and running away from problems, or you can respond by charging head on into those things and confident in your ability to be reconciled. And so I think what Jesus, points out in this passage is that it should be a priority in everything we do. If we're going about our day and we remember that we've done something wrong towards someone else or that they've wronged us and it's obviously affecting our relationship with them, we should drop everything and go and be reconciled to them. Um, I have always held to the standard that I don't like the sun to go down on anger. I don't like the sun to go down on conflict. And that's something that I've carried into my marriage and I try to carry into my friendships and all the relationships I have because I think it's a good practice and it's a good way to go about keeping it a priority. So if I'm laying in bed and I think of something that I have against someone else or that they have against me, I might take the time before bed or the end of that day to try to be reconciled to them. And I don't do it perfectly, but it's something that I desire. I think that the Lord's kind of put on my heart. And I think that's the same attitude that we should all have. Believers should be unified in this, that we should seek to be people of love and compassion and reconciliation rather than anger and bitterness. And especially with this judgment that Jesus has just called, right? I don't want to be before the Father and be held to the same judgment as a murderer. I don't. And honestly, when you think about it, that little bit of like attitude of hate that you have towards someone in your own heart, it's not even worth it. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't change anything. And we're just kidding ourselves if we think that it's actually doing anything. Just being angry all the time and being bitter towards someone. It doesn't fix the problem at all. What fixes the problem is confronting it and being reconciled. So I pray for those who are listening. If you're struggling with anger in a relationship, click off this video. And maybe the first thing you should go do is go be before the Lord and pray about the situation. Um, but before the day is done, reach out to someone who has something against you. Reach out to someone who's wronged you and seek to be reconciled to them, right? Do not allow bitterness to take any hold on your heart. Do not allow anger to take root in your heart. Seek to be compassionate and be reconciled to people.